Hi everyone, today I wanted to talk a little bit about homeschooling. It's something that is a huge part of my life, but it's very different from the other videos you'll see where I talk more about beauty related videos and products and more business related concepts. But today I wanted to talk about all the questions that I get as a homeschooling mom. We sort of end up being inadvertent homeschool ambassadors, and we get a lot of questions, and most of us enjoy answering them, as long as the person who's asking is of a positive mind frame and genuinely interested rather than judgy. No one likes judgy. So what I want to just do is start talking about my story and how I came to decide to homeschool my children, and then I'll address some of the more popular questions that homeschoolers across the country tend to get. For myself, I grew up in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax County. I was always a public school kid. There wasn't any issues in terms of special needs or learning issues, none of that. So just, the average kid in school in this area. And I would say, I have to think back a little bit. Elementary school was relatively easy and enjoyable for me. I wasn't the brightest kid in the class. I wasn't, the smartest, but I wasn't, I would say I was above average. In most subjects, they were fine. I don't remember having any issues in terms of struggling with anything. And by the end of 6th grade, the teacher actually sent home a letter recommending me for gifted and talented classes, which would be like the equivalent of like an AP or an advanced class, starting for 7th and 8th grade for junior high. So that was great for me. And I remember telling my mom when we got the letter, I said, see, I told you I was smart. I was smart. And my mom said, well, I know you're smart. Sometimes you're a little lazy, which I was, No one wants to do homework. I liked learning, and I liked, answering questions in class or working with students. I liked all of that. I liked to learn, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the work, the homework, the worksheets, the tests, the quizzes, that sort of thing. But I remember, like math quizzes, like multiplication, division, I zipped through them, and I was maybe one of the first 10 or so students that finished earlier. So I didn't have any struggles, is what I'm saying. Once I went into junior high, all of our core classes were gifted and talented classes. And I enjoyed those. The teachers, not so much. I don't remember those teachers very fondly, but I do remember my classmates very fondly. And I had a group of girls that I just totally loved, and they were my best friends. So 7th and 8th grade was very fun. And then going into 9th grade and beyond, the work didn't necessarily get harder. It got to be more busy work. It got to a point where I was thinking, I was telling my parents, I'm like, why is it that when you're smarter, you get more work? There should be an advantage to being smarter. You're just bogged down with more stuff. They're like, oh, you could do it. It was easy for you. It didn't take that much time. Here's more, And that wasn't fun, especially as I got to a point where I wanted to be more social. And, you want to start dating, and you want to start having a social life. And then you have more homework. So that wasn't fun. So at that point, I started to drop my advanced classes. And I dropped them, and I think I held on to English and history the longest because it's more my thing. And I remember I really struggled with algebra and Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. Geometry was okay because I could just plug in the numbers into the formulas and it was okay. But algebra was just a whole nother language for me, and I did not do well. And I remember having to go to summer school for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. That's how much I struggled. And so by the time I was in high school, I held on to those classes as long as I could. And then I think by the time I graduated, I wasn't in any, I don't think, maybe English. I might have held on to English. But yeah. So, and then after that, I went to community college, and I was working throughout high school, but, continued to work. And I remember my main focus was getting married and having children. That was my goal, right? So I did that. I succeeded. However, poorly my decision-making skills were at the time in regards to relationships. I did that. So I got married, and I'm very grateful that I was young, because I cannot imagine dealing with little babies in, 30 at the age I am now. It just, no, I got other things to do. So, but I have friends who are just starting their babyhood days, and it's exhausting even watching them. There was a whole several years where it was a fog. So I can definitely relate, but I'm glad those days are over. But I look back on them fondly, and glad that I had those years when I did. So once I got married, and I had my son first and then my daughter, when my son was about 2, I heard about other families who were homeschooling, and I didn't know much about it. And I saw, for example, the Duggar family on TV, and then I started researching and, finding blogs and YouTube videos of homeschooling families, and just wanting, out of curiosity, just to see, what is that like? What is the day in the life of a homeschooler like? And to answer those questions that we all have. I was looking into that. And I hit the library really hard, and I tried to find, and at that time, there weren't a whole lot of homeschooling books at the library. Sorry if you hear, it's very windy. We're getting a little wind from Hurricane Matthew. Gorgeous day, very windy though. And lost my train of thought. So at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of information on homeschooling at the library, but I hit up Amazon pretty hard and checked out curriculum reviews and things like that. So I started to just check it out, basically. I had no intention. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that we had agreed that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, so I knew I was going to be with the kids at home. And we weren't going to pay for preschool, what is it, color, shapes, numbers, that sort of thing. I was doing that at home anyway. And we certainly weren't in a position to pay extra for it, especially since I was home. So we didn't even consider that. And then I knew that I had time with them, basically. My son was 2, and then by the time my daughter was born, still there was going to be at least another 2-3 years before we had to think about kindergarten. And a lot of stuff was changing in our lives around that time as well. So when I look back, we definitely had plenty of time to consider that choice. And my husband at the time was just, operating sort of from ignorance. Just, I don't know how it works, and I'm not sure how long you would want to do it, and maybe just for elementary school, that sort of thing. What my parents were around, so are they going to interfere with studies, things like that. So we just didn't know. And I said, well, we just take it one year at a time. And again, at that point, it was still very new, and nothing was set in stone. So by the time my son was ready for kindergarten, he was at the point where I think both my kids started kindergarten on the later side because of their birthdays. And every state is different, and every state has their own requirements and their kindergarten starting point, their age, the requirement. So in regards to that, if you're curious about your state, it really just depends. I can't tell you what homeschooling is like in Arkansas. I can't tell you what homeschooling is like in California. It's all up to that state. The good thing is, in this country, we can homeschool, and that is fantastic. Now, how each state allows for that is different. Some states are quote unquote easier than other states, and easier means less rules and regulations. Obviously, anything that you do, the more the state tries to regulate it, there's more red tape, and it's annoying. It's more things to deal with when it should be all about the education of the kids. But just to be able to do it is a blessing. It's really, really important that in this country we're able to do that and have that option to begin with. So for Virginia, we had the option of starting them at 5 years old or 6 years old, depending on their birthday, and definitely by 6 they should be in kindergarten. But that also gives people a year if their kids are kind of on the younger side. At 5, if they're not quite ready for half day or full day kindergarten, there's a lot of parents that don't want their kids in full day kindergarten. Some push for full day kindergarten. I know there are some schools that they have like a lottery system where they're trying to get their kids in full day kindergarten, which is crazy to me. I can't imagine wanting your kids away for that long. But some, depending on their situation, if they have to work, kindergarten is another year where they have to worry about aftercare and things like that. So anyway, so at that point, I was ready to, file notice of intent to homeschool, which means you're notifying the county that you live in. And again, every state is different. Some of them, I guess, they might want you to notify the state. Some of it's by county, just so they know what you're doing for education. Are you enrolling them in school? Are you are you homeschooling? Are they in private school? That sort of thing. They have to know what's going on, so they make sure that your child is getting an education. At that point, it was just a matter of play, really, learning through play. Kindergarten age, you're just building on their preschool skills. They're starting to read, and a lot of it is just building their skills through fun ways, so it doesn't feel like work, and the whole point for me is so that I want to avoid a lot of the negativity that happens in schools, a lot of the horrible stories that you hear, a lot of the, the bullying and the sex and the misinformation and the gossip and, the negative aspects of just looking to your peers for information, for guidance, for support, for moral values and things like that, of which, there are very little these days. I wanted to avoid all of that because, when the kids come home every day, they have this much information that they learned from school, in terms of education. And then there's this much that you have to take out of them and chuck it every day, and that's all the negative stuff that they're picking up on. And that's very exhausting. It's exhausting for you as a parent. It's exhausting for the student. The kids are like, I don't know what I saw. I don't know what I heard. I don't know what to do with this information. And they're hearing it at younger and younger ages. And they're spending so much time and energy on, their childish nitpicking and bickering and, who didn't like who and who, had to miss recess today and who didn't sit by who in the cafeteria. All these things that to a certain extent we all experienced them in school, but these days it's quite ugly. It's not what it was like 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think most